All right, let's dive into Silent Hill 2. Why is this game still a horror masterpiece all these years later?
Hmm, good question.
I mean, it came out way back in 2001, right?
Yeah, 2001, we've got a ton of material to dig into.
Reviews, analyses, even some behind-the-scenes stuff from the developers.
Oh, that's always fun.
Should be interesting to see how they pulled it off, you
Yeah.
know? So, are you ready to get spooked?
Always. It's fascinating how Silent Hill 2 came out when most horror games were all about those jump scares
Oh, yeah, the classic jump scares.
and just buckets of gore.
Right, right.
Silent Hill 2 decided to do something different, though. It went for psychological horror,
Interesting.
more about personal guilt, a really unsettling atmosphere,
Okay, I'm intrigued.
and a story that really sticks with you.
So it's not just about things jumping out at you, it's more like messing with your head.
Exactly. I came across this quote in one of the articles that said, Silent Hill 2 changed the horror game world. It focused on deep emotions and scary thoughts, not just loud noises.
Ooh, I like that.
It's so true. It's not about that shock value. It's about this creeping dread that gets under your skin.
So how does it actually do that? What makes it so effective?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to the town of Silent Hill itself.
Okay, the setting.
Yeah, it's not just a backdrop. It's practically its own character in the story.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Imagine this. You're walking through thick fog. You can barely see
Wow,
anything.
that's already creepy.
Right. And the air is heavy with this smell of decay. Buildings are all crumbling.
Like falling apart.
Yeah, exactly.
Ugh,
And the only light is coming from these flickering streetlights.
eerie.
Very eerie. It all just creates this feeling of isolation, and vulnerability.
Oh,
That's what
goodness.
really amps up the fear factor.
You're painting a pretty creepy picture. So the environment really sets the stage.
It does, absolutely.
Then you've got the main character.
James Sunderland.
Right, James.
He gets this letter from his wife, Mary.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Mary's dead.
Whoa, hold on.
Yeah, she's dead. But the letter tells him to meet her in Silent Hill.
So of course he goes.
Well, yeah, wouldn't you?
I guess so. It's his wife.
But the town is more than just a creepy place, you see.
What do you mean?
It's like a manifestation of James's own guilt and trauma.
Wait, hold on. The town is literally built from his guilt.
In a way, yeah.
What? And dots.
It is. All the monsters he encounters, those shifting environments,
Oh,
even
no.
the sounds.
Oh, wow.
It's all a reflection of what's going on inside his head.
The designers used his psyche to design the game.
Yeah, they did.
That's wild.
Pretty unique, right? They crafted this terrifying experience for him and for the player, too.
So it's like his own personal nightmare.
Exactly. A nightmare that feeds off his deepest fears.
And to make things even worse, James isn't some kind of tough guy hero.
No, he's just an ordinary guy.
Like, he doesn't have any special combat skills or anything.
Nope.
No guns blazing.
Not at all. He's incredibly vulnerable.
Oh, I see how that would make it terrifying.
It's every encounter a struggle.
You're not some unstoppable warrior. You're just a regular dude trying to survive this nightmare.
Exactly. That's one of the things that makes Silent Hill 2 so different.
You're really feeling James's fear and desperation because you're in his shoes.
It forces you to confront your own vulnerability.
Huh. Yeah, I can see that.
And then you've got the game's use of symbolism and psychological elements.
Symbolism, huh? That sounds intriguing.
Well, have you ever heard of the other world?
The other world. Rings the bell, but I can't quite place it.
You can think of it as this nightmarish reflection of James's mind.
Oh, okay.
It's not a fixed place or anything. It shifts and changes
Based on what?
based on his internal struggles.
Wow.
One minute it might be all rusty and industrial.
Could that represent his guilt?
It could, yeah.
And then the next minute, it's dark and claustrophobic?
Like he feels trapped.
Yeah, exactly.
The designers use the environments to literally visualize his emotional state.
Whoa, that's
The
mind-blowing.
world around him is literally warping and changing based on his thoughts and feelings.
That's amazing.
And then you have the monsters.
Okay, tell me about the monsters.
They're often symbolic representations of James's repressed memories or desires.
They're not just random creatures.
Not at all. Each one is carefully designed.
To evoke a certain feeling.
Yeah, or to represent some aspect of James's psyche.
So the monsters are like clues to understanding what's going on in his head.
You got it.
What kind of monsters are we talking about here? Like, give me an example.
Well, take Pyramid Head, for instance.
Oh yeah, Pyramid Head, he's iconic.
He is. He's become a symbol of the whole franchise.
I can see why.
He's this massive figure with that giant pyramid-shaped helmet.
It's an incredible design, instantly recognizable.
But it's not just about the design.
There's a deeper meaning.
Oh, absolutely. His appearance, his movements, even the weapon he carries.
What does it all mean?
It's all connected to James's feelings of guilt and his repressed desires.
I'm both intrigued and slightly terrified at this point.
Good, good, good.
So we've got this unsettling atmosphere, a protagonist battling his inner demons.
And these deeply symbolic monsters, like Pyramid Head.
It's all connected.
Silent Hill 2 is less about fighting monsters and more about confronting your own darkness.
You're getting it. And there's another layer of depth, too.
Okay, what's that?
The game has multiple endings.
Multiple endings.
Yeah, each one reflecting a different interpretation of James's journey and the choices he makes.
Oh, that's interesting.
It makes you think about the game's deeper meaning,
What it all means about guilt, trauma, the power of the subconscious.
Exactly. It's really thought-provoking.
Multiple endings, I love that.
It's brilliant.
Gets players thinking and debating.
And coming up with their own interpretations.
For sure. We've talked a lot about the psychological aspects, but what about the actual gameplay? Was it technically impressive for its time? I mean, 2001 wasn't exactly yesterday.
Oh, absolutely. Silent Hill 2 was groundbreaking in a lot of ways.
Oh, really?
Well, remember that fog we were talking about?
Yeah, the super creepy fog.
It wasn't just for visual effect.
The developers used it to create a sense of claustrophobia and uncertainty.
Makes sense.
And back then, rendering fog like that on the PlayStation 2,
Yeah, that must have been tough.
it was a major technical achievement.
So the fog wasn't just an aesthetic choice. It actually had a gameplay purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It limited your visibility, added to that feeling of vulnerability. Right. And then there's the use of fixed camera angles.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
It was inspired by classic horror films,
Oh, that makes sense.
Gave the game this really cinematic feel.
And probably made it feel even more unsettling,
Oh, definitely.
like you were being watched.
Yes. Like something was lurking just outside your view.
Ooh, I get chills just thinking about it.
It's a very effective technique.
You're never really in control of what you can see.
Adds to that whole feeling of being trapped and vulnerable.
Speaking of senses, what about the sound design? Was that a big part of the horror experience?
Sound design is crucial to Silent Hill 2.
Yeah.
I mean, the soundtrack itself is unsettling, to say the least.
Who composed it?
Akira Yamaoka.
Oh, I know that name.
He did an incredible job.
What kind of music are we talking about here?
Think of it as silence punctuated by industrial sounds
Oh, that's creepy.
and these haunting melodies.
It's all about building tension, keeping you on edge.
Exactly.
They didn't just use music, though, right? What about other sounds?
They use what we call diegetic sound really well.
Diegetic sounds.
Sounds that exist within the game world.
Like footsteps and stuff.
More like whispers
Oh,
coming from unseen sources.
spooky.
They really play with your senses, make you feel like you're always being watched.
You're really trying to make me paranoid, huh?
Maybe just a little. But seriously, the sound design adds so much to the psychological horror.
I can totally see that.
Hmm.
But what about the actual mechanics of the game? What was it like to play?
Silent Hill 2 isn't really about fast-paced action.
Okay, so not a lot of running and gunning.
Not really, no.
So what's the combat like?
To be honest, a lot of people criticize it for being a bit clunky.
Really? You'd think they'd want smooth combat, especially in a horror game,
You'd think so, right?
when you're already on edge.
But here's the thing.
What's that?
That clunkiness actually contributes to the feeling of vulnerability.
Oh, I see.
Remember, James isn't a trained fighter.
Right, just an average guy.
Thrown into this terrifying situation.
Every fight feels desperate.
Exactly. You're not feeling powerful and in control.
More like barely hanging on.
That's the point.
Huh?
What about the puzzles?
Were there a lot of puzzles in the game?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What kind of puzzles?
They're not your typical find the key, open the door puzzles.
What do you mean?
They often incorporate dreamlike logic and symbolism.
Dreamlike logic. So the solutions don't always make sense.
But not in a normal way, no.
Like it's all kind of twisted and strange.
Yeah, you have to think outside the box.
Interesting.
Pay close attention to your surroundings.
And really immerse yourself in the game's logic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And often, the solutions are directly tied to the themes of the game.
Okay, so it's not just about finding the right item.
No, it's about understanding the themes and symbolism at a deeper level.
That's really cool.
It's not just about what you do
But why you do it.
and what it all means in the context of James's journey.
It's all connected.
Very much so.
Wow, this game sounds really deep.
It is, and there are all these little details throughout, things you might miss on your first playthrough.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, there's this one scene where you have to stomp on a fallen enemy
To do what?
to confirm their death.
Wait, what? Why would you have to do that?
It's disturbing, right?
Yeah, kinda.
But it adds this visceral, unsettling layer to the combat
Hmm.
and makes you confront the brutality of your actions.
Even though it's just a game,
Exactly.
it's one thing to shoot or stab an enemy.
But to have to physically stomp on them
Yeah, that's different.
makes the violence feel more real.
More disturbing.
And it's like the game is making you confront the darkness.
Not just in the game, but maybe even within yourself.
You got it. Silent Hill 2 doesn't shy away from disturbing imagery
That's definitely part of what makes it so effective.
as a psychological horror experience.
It's not just about scaring you.
It's about making you think, making you feel uncomfortable.
So we've talked about the psychological horror, the symbolism, the use of technology, the unsettling gameplay.
A lot to unpack.
What about its legacy? How did Silent Hill 2 influence the horror genre as a whole?
Its influence is huge. It's undeniable.
Really?
It proved that you don't need jump scares and gore to make a truly terrifying game.
It can be more about psychological depth,
Exactly. A strong narrative.
a truly unsettling atmosphere.
And it's not just games that were influenced.
No.
Silent Hill 2 has had a huge impact on popular culture in general.
Oh, I can see that.
Like, think about Pyramid Head.
He's everywhere.
He's become this instantly recognizable figure in horror.
You see him on T-shirts and memes.
He's become a symbol of psychological horror.
It's like Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees.
Exactly. They represent a specific type of horror,
That resonates with people.
even if you haven't seen the movies.
Or played the games.
Right.
And the fact that Silent Hill 2 got a remake in 2024.
Remake.
Yeah, and it was a huge success.
That's amazing.
And to be considered a classic is one thing, but to get a remake decades later,
That's saying something.
it shows its staying power.
For sure.
Speaking of the remake, did they change much?
Well, they updated the graphics, obviously.
Makes sense.
Made some gameplay tweaks to modernize it.
But they didn't change the core of the game, right?
They were really smart about it.
Yeah.
They understood that the core elements,
The psychological horror, the symbolism,
the unsettling atmosphere.
they knew not to mess with that.
Exactly. They respected the source material.
That's so important.
And that respect shows in how the remake was received.
People liked it
Critics and fans loved it. They praised how faithful it was.
while still feeling fresh.
Exactly. It felt relevant for modern gamers.
They found that sweet spot between honoring the original and updating it.
They did a great job.
Before we move on, can we go back to the multiple endings for a second?
Ah, yes, the multiple endings.
They're a really important part of what makes Silent Hill 2 so thought-provoking, aren't they?
Absolutely.
It's not just about different ways to finish the game.
No.
It's about different interpretations of what happened to James.
And what his journey really meant.
Each ending offers a different perspective.
On his psyche, his motivations, his fate.
It's up to the player to decide which ending feels the most true.
Or the most impactful, or even the most disturbing.
So there's no one right answer.
Not at all.
There's no one definitive way to interpret the game.
It's all about how you engage with it.
With the story, the characters.
And your own understanding of guilt, trauma, fear.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It's brilliant.
Silent Hill 2 doesn't give you easy answers.
No, it doesn't.
It makes you confront uncomfortable truths
Makes you question your perceptions.
and draw your own conclusions about what it all means.
It's a really powerful experience.
It sounds like it
And it's one that stays with you.
long after you finish playing.
Absolutely.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it makes you think. All right, but it's not just the music.
Right.
They use what we call diegetic sound really effectively, too.
Diegetic sound.
Yeah, it's sounds that exist within the game world, like, that could actually be happening in that space.
So like footsteps and stuff?
Well, not quite. More like whispers, or strange noises coming from places you can't see.
Spooky.
Messes with you a little bit. Makes you feel like you're always being watched or hunted.
Even when you can't actually see anything.
Exactly.
Okay, you're definitely trying to make me paranoid now.
Maybe a little bit. But no, seriously, the sound design, it just adds so much to the whole psychological horror thing.
Yeah, totally. So we've talked about the sound, the visuals. What of the actual, the mechanics of the game? What's it like to play?
Well, Silent Hill 2 isn't really known for its, fast-paced action.
Okay, so no, crazy gunfights or anything.
Not really, no.
What about the combat? How does that work?
Well, honestly, the combat system gets criticized a lot.
For what?
A lot of people think it feels kind of clunky.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. I mean, you'd think they'd want the combat to be really smooth, especially in a horror game.
Yeah, you're already on edge, right? You don't need clunky controls on top of that.
Exactly. But there's something interesting about it.
What's that?
That clunkiness actually adds to the feeling of vulnerability. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay, I see.
James isn't a trained fighter or anything.
Right, he's just a regular guy.
Just an average guy thrown into this nightmare.
Yeah.
So when you're playing as him, every fight, it feels desperate.
Like you're barely surviving.
You're not this powerful, action hero.
More like you're just trying to get by.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point.
Makes sense. I can see how that would add to the tension, for sure.
Mm-hmm. What about puzzles?
Were there a lot of puzzles in the game?
Oh, yeah. Tons.
What were they like?
Well, they're not like your typical, find the key, open the door kind of puzzles.
Oh, okay, so they're more complex than that.
Yeah, a lot more complex. They incorporate like dreamlike logic and symbolism.
Dreamlike logic, what's that?
Basically, the solutions don't always make sense.
Yeah.
In a normal waking world kind of way.
Right, so it's all kind of twisted and strained.
Exactly. You have to think outside the box,
Mhm.
really pay attention to your surroundings.
And immerse yourself in that kind of twisted logic.
Exactly. And a lot of times the solutions, they're tied to the themes of the game,
Okay.
to James's psychological state or
Mhm.
the symbolisms of the monsters and the environments.
All connected.
It really is. It's not just about finding the right item or pressing the right button or whatever.
You have to understand the deeper meaning.
That's what makes the puzzle so cool, I think.
Yeah, it's like the puzzles themselves are another way of exploring those themes.
Exactly. And it's not just the puzzles that make you think either. There are all these little details throughout the game. Things you might not even notice on your first playthrough.
Like what?
Well, there's this one scene, you have to stomp on a fallen enemy.
Like step on them.
Yeah, to confirm that they're dead.
To make sure they're actually dead. Why would you have to do that?
Well, it's pretty disturbing, right?
Yeah, kinda.
But it just adds this really, visceral, unsettling layer to the combat.
I guess so.
It makes you confront the brutality of what you're doing, even though it's in a video game.
Right, it's one thing to, shoot a monster, stab a monster, whatever.
But to physically stomp on them to make sure they're really dead.
Yeah, that's definitely a different level of disturbing.
It makes the violence feel much more real and kind of makes you think about it a little bit more,
Makes you confront the darkness, not just in the game world, but maybe even within yourself.
You got it.
Yeah.
Silent Hill 2. It doesn't shy away from that kind of stuff,
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of what makes it so effective, I think.
As a psychological horror experience.
Right. It's not just about cheap scares.
It's about making you think about things, making you feel a little uncomfortable.
So we've talked about the psychological horror, the symbolism, the really innovative use of technology, the unsettling gameplay.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
What about the game's legacy? Like, how did Silent Hill 2 influence the horror genre as a whole?
Well, its influence is huge. I mean, there's no denying that.
In what way?
Well, it proved that you don't need, jump scares and buckets of blood to make a truly scary game.
It can be about something more?
Exactly. It can be about psychological depth. It can be about a really strong narrative.
A truly unsettling atmosphere.
Exactly. And it's not just games that were influenced either.
What else?
Silent Hill 2 has had a big impact on, popular culture in general.
Yeah, I can see that.
Think about Pyramid Head.
He's so iconic.
He's become this instantly recognizable figure in horror.
Yeah. Yeah, you see him on T-shirts and memes.
All over the place.
He's become a symbol of psychological horror in a way.
Exactly. It's like Freddy Krueger, or Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
They represent a certain type of horror,
That people just connect with
even if they haven't seen the movies.
or played the games.
Right. And the fact that Silent Hill 2 got a remake in 2024.
A remake. Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And it was a huge success, too.
People loved it.
Yeah, they did. It's amazing to think about, to be considered a classic is one thing.
But to be relevant enough to get a full remake decades later.
That says something about its staying power for sure.
Yeah, it really does. So speaking of the remake, did they change a lot? Or did they try to stay pretty faithful to the original?
I mean, they updated the graphics, of course.
Right, make it look more modern.
And made a few gameplay tweaks to kind of, modernize it a bit.
But they didn't mess with the story or anything?
No, they were really smart about it, actually.
How so?
They understood that the core elements of Silent Hill 2, things that made it so powerful.
Yeah, like the psychological horror.
The symbolism, the unsettling atmosphere, all that stuff.
They knew not to mess with that.
Exactly. They really respected the source material.
Which is so important with a remake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that respect shows in how the remake was received.
Yeah. People could tell that they cared about the original.
Yeah, both critics and fans, they praised how faithful it was.
But it still felt fresh.
Yeah, it did. It felt relevant for modern gamers.
It's a tough balance to strike.
but they pulled it off.
So it sounds like they found that sweet spot between honoring the original and updating it for a new audience.
Yeah, they did a great job. Before we move on, though, can we go back to the multiple endings for a second?
Yeah, sure.
I think that's a really important part of what makes Silent Hill 2 so thought-provoking. You know,
The different endings. Yeah.
it's not just about having different ways to finish the game, you know?
Mm.
It's about offering different interpretations of what happened to James.
What his journey meant.
Exactly. And each ending, it reflects a different understanding of his psyche.
His motivations, even his fate, ultimately.
It's up to the player to decide which ending feels the most true to them, you know,
Or the most impactful.
or even the most disturbing.
Right. So there's no one right answer.
Not at all. No single definitive way to interpret the game.
It's all about how you, as the player, engage with it, you know?
With the story, with the characters.
And ultimately with your own understanding of guilt and trauma and fear, you know?
Yeah, that's really fascinating.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Silent Hill 2, it doesn't give you easy answers.
It really doesn't. It makes you work for it.
Yeah, it makes you confront uncomfortable truths, you know?
Makes you question your perception.
Makes you really think about what it all means.
And that's what makes it such a powerful experience, I think.
It really is, and it's one that stays with you.
Yeah, it really makes you think, huh? It's one of those games that just sticks with you, even after you've put the controller down.
It is, for sure. It's not just about the scares, you know?
No, it's about how it makes you feel, the emotional and psychological impact it has on you.
Exactly, and that's why even after all these years, it's still considered like, one of the best horror games ever made.
It really set a new standard. It showed that horror games could be more than just jump scares,
They could be smart, they could be thought-provoking.
and they could be really emotionally resonant too.
Man, we really went deep on this one.
We did, didn't we?
From those creepy fog-choked streets to the depths of James Sunderland's mind.
Yeah, we covered it all.
Symbolism, technical brilliance, the game's lasting impact.
And we've honestly only scratched the surface.
Oh, I bet.
There's so much to unpack in Silent Hill 2. It really rewards multiple playthroughs,
You notice new things each time.
Exactly. And the more you analyze it, the more you think about it, the more layers of meaning you uncover.
You've definitely convinced me I need to experience this for myself.
You should.
Looks like I know what I'm doing this weekend.
Yeah.
But before I fire up the PlayStation, is there anything you would tell someone playing Silent Hill 2 for the first time? Any advice?
Good question.
Yeah, like, is there anything they should be looking out for or paying attention to?
I'd say just pay attention to the details.
Yeah.
What kind of details? The environments, the sound design, the dialogue, the symbolism, like every little thing in Silent Hill 2 is there for a reason.
Okay, so everything is deliberate.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's all carefully crafted to create a certain mood and convey a deeper meaning.
I see.
So don't just play the game,
What do you mean?
experience it, really let it get under your skin.
I like that. That's good advice for sure.
I think so too.
Well, I think it's time for us to step out of the fog and back into reality for now.
Back to the real world.
But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. Even though Silent Hill 2 is a video game, its exploration of human psychology and fear is something that can really stay with you.
Long after you finish playing.
So I want you to ask yourself this. What does the town of Silent Hill represent to you? What does your interpretation of James's journey and the ending say about how you view guilt and trauma and the power of the subconscious?
That's a good question.
It is, isn't it? It's something to ponder for sure. Well, until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves.
Very true.